You're listening to LeaderCast, episode 168. Welcome to LeaderCast, Transforming Missions podcast with Tim Bias and Sarah Thomas, providing you with insights and resources you need to lead a movement of Jesus followers.
Some of our differences are very apparent, but when the gathering for worship to me is, and prayer is the place that we are trying to encounter our divine creator, to be more human and to be more of what God would have us to be. And that's the place that kind of helps me to, that's just who I am. I lean into that.
Today we're having a conversation with Curnell Graham. We talk about self-awareness through the lens of our families of origin, through our calling, through grace. We talk about race and relationships and the choice to love. We talk about the isms that exist in our society and how to counteract those. But above all, Curnell turned self-awareness upside down or inside out, I'm not sure exactly how to say it, into God awareness. So listen closely as Curnell offers his perspective of being a leader and on growing in self-awareness. As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/podcast. You can also go directly to this episode at transformingmission.org/168. Without any further wait, here's our conversation with Curnell Graham.
Well, good morning, Curnell. Welcome to LeaderCast.
It's good to be with you.
To help our listeners know who you are, why don't you tell us who you are and what you get paid to do?
My name is Curnell Graham. I currently serve as the lead pastor at the Christ United Methodist Church here on, I think, what is known as the southeast side of Columbus. I've been a pastor in the United Methodist Church for 34 years now. And so my journey has been in itinerancy from South Carolina now to Columbus with lots of stops in between.
Part of what we try to do with LeaderCast is to provide insights and resources for courageous leaders. Could you tell us what being a courageous leader means to you?
For me, being a courageous leader means someone who is willing to look beyond whether or not in any given moment they are going to be popular or always totally understood or appreciated, but standing on principle, standing for what you believe is truthful and what you believe is just, and often what you feel is prophetic in a given moment in time.
My experience of you is that you do this very well. I know that's why you're on this podcast. During our time together, Sarah and I have had conversation about what do courageous leaders need to know or do or understand. And one of those is self-awareness. So our conversation today, as in the month of March, is on self-awareness. So I'm grateful for you and for how you bear witness to being a courageous leader.
I would say is in terms of self-awareness is knowing who you are. And I believe that I'm always rooted in my upbringing, and I'm proud of, being a PK. I'm the son of a pastor. I'm the grandson of a pastor. I'm a son of South Carolina. And, all of growing up in the 60s in South Carolina, in a parsonage home, all of that, to my education or a historically Black college, to a majority white university, Duke University. So it's where my family of origin, my education, and most of all, my sense of calling to be in ministry that shapes who I am. And so who I am today is shaped out of my journey in faith from family and the other things that have helped shape who I am now at 57 years old.
Hearing you say that, Curnell, I'm wondering, has that always been in your purview of awareness in terms of your identity and self-awareness? Said a different way, when did you become aware how important what you just named, being a son of South Carolina, being a son of a PK, growing up in a home that was rooted in faith, how those things have shaped you to be who you are.
Well, as I talk about, my itinerancy in terms of where I've, beyond seminary, I served for 2 years in South Carolina. And one of those places of becoming aware, when you get beyond the formal education of seminary, we all had that journey of theory. And then when you get into the field and you got to now put theory into practice, you began to, hit that intersection. And so for me, South Carolina, the church Methodism and being a pastor was in that context. And I had those first 2 years and became an elder. And then all of a sudden, my next appointment was in urban ministry and in Akron, Ohio, and in East Ohio, and just beginning to realize that the ethos or the context of how you were raised and your sense of calling, now the context has changed. And so you really need to know who you are and what you are about, because you're in a different environment trying to do ministry. And I'm sure we'll say more about that later, but that's became that place of awareness of, where you came from and that you're in a very different context, but you got some, again, those guiding principles that helps you to stay steady.
Thank you for that. Part of my curiosity came because I think what I observe so often in ministry is there is that moment that we do become more aware of who we are. And when that doesn't happen, it can lead to some missteps. And when we don't take that into account and lead from that place. So thanks for taking that little detour with me.
Well, again, I guess I want to just reiterate. First of all, my sense of calling happened in my teenage years. And again, it happened in the context of being in a, high school, being in a predominantly Black high school, going to a predominantly Black college, then going to a major white, going to Duke University, and each one of those steps, it's already, you already set in who you are, but now you are interacting in an environment that's very different than what you grew up in. And then you are beginning to encounter that sense of, being a child of God, being a person of faith, and hearing and seeing expressions of faith kind of lived out differently, or becoming more aware of the wider world. So again, going back to that self-awareness, always being aware that, of who you are, and many times being a first or being an only. And as an African-American, sometimes when you're in the class and you're the only African-American person in that class, when you've been in one environment where everybody, you're in a homogeneous environment where everybody's the same. And then all of a sudden, you realize that you are uniquely the only person in this room, and the subject or the discussion comes around race or justice, and your perspective is very different when you now are in a place where people who come from a different place of privilege. And so, just still never cowering or feeling as if though because who you are and where you came from, you are any less than anyone else.
So can we explore that a little bit more as we consider the makeup of our denomination? And being an African-American pastor in a predominantly white denomination, and also in the context that you have served in urban and suburban in communities, being an African-American man in leadership, I'm wondering what experiences you have had with leaders or people who are not self-aware.
Yes, I have. I think that when I think of, let me fast forward from just the class to being a pastor or being in ministry. I'm gonna go from, for me, a little bit of that urban ministry, leaving South Carolina, going to Akron, and I was in a position as an executive director. And again, another one of these kind of firsts. So I'm over an urban ministry in Akron, and I'm the first African-American executive director. And I go into an neighborhood outreach ministry, and I have an all-white staff, and I'm the executive director slash pastor, what they call it, executive director, neighborhood pastor. And, within a couple of days, within 2 weeks, the administrative assistant, who within 2 weeks tenders her resignation and says, I've been thinking about retirement, and I just think the time is right. And you feel like something is a little off. You just got to go with it. Now I can fast forward and say that it is, because it's years later when I meet that person, when they feel the need to be honest and confessional around the fact that she just not know how to identify with a 25-year-old Black man as her supervisor, and felt as if though the best thing she could do is move on. But in time, as she watched me in that role, she was able to at least, articulate, apologize, and many other things. All of a sudden, it's like, this is a different world now. I'm simply here trying to do ministry. And when you begin to do ministry with a different dynamic, you begin to know, again, knowing who you are and knowing that we live in a world where everyone has not had the cultural awareness, competency to know how to mutually respect or even have honest dialogue with a person of a different race.
Curnell, you and I have been friends for a while, and I've learned a lot from you. So I know part of what I'm ready to ask, but what impact has that had on you as a person or as a leader, and then as a child of God?
I think the impact was that I believe that, first of all, that there are people that simply have not been a place where they've had to build relationships, deeper, meaningful relationship across racial lines. And they are living maybe with some blindness or biases that some of them that they don't even know they were living with. And when they're confronted with having to interact in a very different way than they have ever had to interact, some of them simply will escape. And so, but the other thing it taught me was to say that not to take it personally or put it on the side of just labeling it simply, oh, this person is racist or does not like me because I am, but to look deeper and see that sometimes people need to grow together. And I'm just going to continue in that same place where I'm in that kind of pastor, white pastor at that church where my office was. We started going to lunch and developing a relationship. I guess over time, I saw the difference in people willing to be in closer relationship. Too many of us, or too many people in our world, I hope it's better now. This is 30 some years ago, but too many individuals have lived in their kind of isolated worlds, and they have not taken the time to build relationships, and they are operating too much out of what they have seen or perceptions or prejudices that they have developed over time. And I just believe that, relationship, one-on-one, interpersonal relationship will help to break down some of these barriers.
So you pointed to it. I'm just going to ask you, is it better 34 years later?
Somewhat, but it's also disheartening that we are going around these same issues. It's like, as we deal with the issue of race and racism, I think it's so deep seated in our country and in our culture that it's not a one and done. With social media, I just looked at my Facebook post that popped up, and it said 6 years ago, I'm in Cincinnati in ORV. Sarah, I think you were there too. And the conversations that we were having in the district around race and policing, where we had just had the flare up of police shootings, and there was a sensitivity around that. And we're trying to deal with it. I can go to Battle Creek Mission and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and conversation. I literally could go to every community that I've lived and find that, again, an anti-racism or attack. There has been some place where there's been trying to get conversations to get people together to understand how do we begin to tear down some of these barriers.
Yeah, and you hit on one that I hope folks listening hear you say, the importance of relationships. It has to start there. And when we stay in our own little bubble, those relationships don't happen. Anything else that you want to say about what impact that had on you as a leader, person, or child of God?
Well, I feel that I've been called, in terms of, that early impact and things that happened earlier in life that I saw my dad witness and stuff, to say, I feel it necessary to stay engaged and stay in a multiracial or multicultural environment. There are times when, I simply want to just go back to South Carolina and be in one of those nice, comfortable Black churches that nurtured me. I simply want to just, go and kind of live in that, what I feel is a very safe space to be, because I've had experiences where any of them that could have hurt or wound, without my faith, without my understanding of the love of Jesus Christ and the need to love, I would have given up. But I feel that I've been called to maybe stand in environments that are often uncomfortable, and to give voice sometimes to some things that are hard to say, but that people need to hear, and to speak the truth in love, and to always say, you know what, I'm going to keep loving people no matter how ugly I see behavior can be. I'm going to continue to love, but I'm going to also continue to try to speak truth and stand in my truth.
That's because that's who you are. And I'm grateful. You are a courageous leader, and you've demonstrated that. And that when we entered this pandemic, the church where you pastor was one of the first ones that went to the parking lot worship. So you had to make some decisions at that point that people who had never done this before were going to have to do something. You actually are praying for people every morning when some people aren't even up yet. You are leading prayer meetings, and that's not because I'm going to say it this way. You may change it. We've had these conversations, and because I've learned lots from you. But I don't think you do that because you're a religious person. I think you do that because that's who you are, and these are the ways of developing and maintaining those relationships. Am I close?
Amen. Yes. I feel like people of faith and people of all creeds, I think fundamentally, if we believe in this sense of God as this divine creator who created us all, and that in God's eyes and in God's standing, we're all the same. God loves us all. And so one of those places that I feel that the isms and the barriers cannot break through is in that conversation with God in prayer and in a place of worship. And to say that, you know what, everybody that gathers to worship together, no one checks and asks, what political party you belong to. We see, some of our differences are very apparent, but when the gathering for worship to me is, and prayer is the place that we are trying to encounter our divine creator, to be more human and to be more of what God would have us to be. And that's the place that kind of helps me to, that's just who I am. I lean into that. And so, the bright light for me in a church, at one place in ministry, when I served one of our larger churches of nearly 1,000 people, the most sacred time for me was the 7 or 8 people, sometimes 3, that committed every Monday morning to sit at a table, have conversation, and pray with me. I was much more fed and energized by a table of 3 to 7 than I was when I was standing in front of 300 or 400. But it was that table of 3 to 7 that kept me with the ability and the strength to stand in front of the 300.
I want to acknowledge what you're teaching me and reminding me is the number of times, Curnell, that what I'm hearing you say is that you've made an intentional choice to love and to be in relationship. And all of that comes out of your calling and your faith.
Yes.
What a beautiful reminder of what it means to be a courageous leader. We make a choice. We make a choice. And over again, I hear you making a choice. And often that choice, it sounds simple, but it's not. We all know it's hard, is to love.
And just on another practical level, I think I've said it, but let me make sure I make this point. Cincinnati, having served most of my itinerancy in historically Black churches, there's not a community that I've been in, when I've been in Omaha and I was in Michigan, Battle Creek, Canton, Ohio, I've not lived in any community or any church that was homogenous, was all one thing or the other. And every one of those places, every church I've been in has been, here we are in a very racially diverse community. But here, the constituents of this church, we are all Black. What does it mean? What is the witness to who we are? And there would always be these ministries. There would always be these times and places where, we're having this event, and so we see others come to this musical, or others come to this pantry, or others come, and there would always be that challenge of, and this is the thing for me, is when I think about communion and the table in the church, is always, if we really love God, who's not at the table? Who's not here? Who do we see and interact with every day? And how do we continue to perpetuate or not work toward being a community, being this higher ideal of what Dr. King would say, exhibiting the beloved community? And that's challenging, that challenge us, to push us to say, folk, we're missing a part of who we need to be as we try to reach the world if we don't really deal the dynamic of race within the institutional church, in the local church, has been one of those issues that I've been compelled to always have to address, deal with, pray about, wrestle with, and get other people to struggle with. It's not enough just to say what's happening beyond the doors of our church, what's happening within side of this local congregation, and how are we stepping beyond our comfort zones to say we need to build these relationships.
We've talked a lot about most of our conversation today has been around for leadership, but there's another place for self-awareness with me, and I'm taking advantage now of knowing a little bit about your life. In the last couple of years, you've lost two parents. You've had some other family crises, and yet you still come out. I know that there's a struggle. We've had conversations about this. I know there's grief, but you still come out ahead. And what I mean by that is those things don't defeat you. So there's a place where you're making some other decisions. What goes on inside of Curnell Graham that gets him to the place to be the person that he is in the midst of such grief and crisis?
Well, I believe that, one of the first major landmines in my life that intersected ministry was when I went through divorce. And I felt as if though when I felt my marriage coming apart, and I was at a place that, that I was at that place where I felt as if though because my marriage failed, that I was unworthy, to be in ministry, or I needed to step away from ministry. And I'm thankful for a layperson. On a day I'm in Michigan, and I'm walking to my car, and something in my expression, a member of the staff stopped me and said, "Pastor, how are you feeling?" And I said, "Well, I'm not, I shared something about my feelings. And I said, I'm going to I'm going to the district office, because I was literally going to say, I'm going to exit ministry or take time out. And she said, "Why?" And I said, I'm at this place where, having done everything I can, my marriage is falling apart and I just don't feel. And she said to me, God rest her soul, Sister Johnny Shepherd. I can call her name. No one will know her, but I can call Sister Johnny's name, and said, James is my second husband. I'm remarried. And she named off 7 or 8 couples in the congregation I was serving that had gone through divorce and remarriage. And she said, "You've been our faithful pastor over the last maybe 4 years at that point, and we have seen your faith. Why is it that the faith that you preach, that as you walk through this storm and others have walked through, maybe God is going to use this opportunity to even give you some new ways to minister to others of us who've walked the same road." And so I can say, from divorce to the death of my parents to all of those things you talked about, she helped me at a new place of self-awareness to being in ministry does not absolve any of us from all of the vicissitudes of life that everyone else deals with. And people really look at, how does our faith help us to deal with that? Or someone else said it well and said, it's not why the bad things happen to good people, but said another way is, what do people of faith do when bad things happen? That's a true measure of your faith. And so I've learned that that's been the thing of, but it certainly has made me even more sensitive and more aware. The death of my parents have been, like many have walked that same road. And I can particularly say the death of my mother during COVID and what that has meant, and people who are grieving. So I've been able to encourage a whole lot of individuals and advise them, because it's even added another layer to grieving families that are grieving during this COVID, because you can't, those things that you go to, when I went home after the death of my mother, to not be able to hug and embrace my family of origin, to have to worry about separation of being, safety when you're hurting. So having walked through it, I've used it to help others to walk through it.
I appreciate you sharing that. I think you even, if I may, and we don't have to use this if you don't want to, but I think after your mother's death, you even gathered all your siblings together to look at life a little differently as you celebrated her life and maybe the life of your father as well. You were working on a way to bring about new life in the midst of all the things that were trying to tear you apart.
Yes, I did. We have these pillars in our lives. My parents were two of my pillars. And I said, when my mother just kind of got her wings on April 24th, I said, now all of a sudden we've been blessed because I'm the youngest of six. And, and so to say to them or pull them together and say, hey, folks, they have always said, I said, now that both of our parents are gone, we have to hold each other up. We've connected and they're all in South Carolina and I'm here. And so we have, through conference calls, Skype, just finding ways to be together and to stay together and to hold up each other. It's been important for each of us.
Have you had to temper your courage as a leader? The question seems silly now. And why I said it seems silly is the grace that you exude, Curnell. I can't put that with the word temper. So I don't know. Do you want to answer that question?
Yes. Well, let me go to an example. Let me go and say that 3 or 4 years ago, I was at a church, and anyone will hear this, they'll figure out what church and what. And I'm not disparaging, but imagine it's a Martin Luther King weekend, and our President of the United States has made disparaging remarks about a couple of countries, called them, and most people will recall what that is. You're tasked with preaching, and you happen to be me, but I am, an African-American male listening to the commander-in-chief, who I pray for every day, make a disparaging remarks about countries that happen to be ethnic countries on Martin Luther King weekend. And I'm up to preach. And I'm reading the letter from the Birmingham jail. So, and I know, and to put it in context, I'm a Black preacher getting ready to preach to an all-white audience. I'm a person of faith. And I have that moment of, and so I have to lean into the courage that others have had. And to say, you know what, the worst thing that may happen today, and I'm thankful, Tim, the worst thing that may happen today is someone will go out the other side of the church and don't shake my hand, or I might get an email, or a superintendent might get a letter, or the staff, and all of that happened. But you know what? After being led and preaching and saying what I felt needed to be said, it was, at least the sermon ended in applause, and people, appreciate it. Now, some said, we'll always say, sometimes when you got to speak truth, your truth as you feel it and know it, someone may accuse you of being political or being this or that. But you gotta, at the end of the day, each of us have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror with integrity. And so I praise God that I feel as if though that and many other times, I had to look at the courage of others to find the courage in myself to say what I face doesn't compare to fire hoses or dogs or be in jail. I may lose an appointment, but at least I'm not gonna, I'm not facing the possibility. You never know, but I don't feel as if the preaching is gonna cost me my life, literally, or my family. And we stand on the shoulders of those that were willing to risk so much more than being defriended on Facebook or not being seen as cool or popular.
Well said.
That's a good word for the times that we are living in. Thank you for taking my question and making it meaningful. You've poured out wisdom, Curnell.
You've given us enough that we could take anything that you've said to be able to do this. So what's your best wisdom you can share with leaders about self-awareness?
I think it's just simply be true to yourself. First of all, take time to get to know who you are And I think also is have some trusted friends who will always tell you the truth. I've got a few of those that I can count on to always tell me not what they think I need to hear, but they'll speak truth to me. And that's important.
Are you ready for the rapid fire questions?
Go for it.
These are fun and silly.
Okay.
So, first question, Curnell. What is your favorite meal to eat out?
Seafood, salmon fixed many different ways.
What do people misunderstand about you?
That one I don't know. I think one of the things people misunderstand in this church of hierarchy, so to speak, is often people have misperceived that I'm waiting on the next great thing. When I'm satisfied to say wherever I'm serving, I'm thankful to God for the privilege of serving.
What Netflix series, movie, or TV show have you binge watched lately?
Amy, well, after getting off of Hallmark movies, we just watched this whole, I almost want to holler for Amy to tell me what the name of it is, with the Bridgertons. She was watching it and she's like, you might not like this. And I saw an episode, she had watched it all. And then I had to go back through. And I'm grateful for a holiday because, I spent about 8 or 9 hours getting all of the Bridgerton.
Curnell, what are you reading? What have you been reading recently?
Well, I started to read after reading the Being an Anti-Racist. I'm reading some of President Obama's book, and then I got another stack of stuff that I haven't gotten to yet. But reading President Obama's memoirs is a huge book, but just kind of reflecting between that and finishing up, going back through the anti-racism book. It's been the two that's right with me now, and then I've got a stack for the year.
What's bringing you joy these days?
Amy and my grandchildren are a constant source. Family is always a constant source. I have two daughters. I have 2 granddaughters, and 2 and a 6-year-old. They're in Akron, and when I can get them on occasion, man, kids just, being able to be a grandparent is an absolute joy. And with these girls, I've had daughters, and now I got granddaughters. They bring me joy.
Curnell, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today to share your courage, your grace, your calling, and who you are as a leader. So thank you. Is there any last minute word that you would like to offer to our listeners?
I just say I'm thankful for the work that Sarah, for you and Tim, the way in which you are helping to inform leaders. Your podcast blesses me, and I hope something I said today might bless somebody. I just hope that it helps someone. But
Curnell, I've told you this before, but I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you. I am the person I am because of you. You have enriched my life. You've helped me see things to which I was blind, and I'm growing, and I am grateful for you. So just to have this conversation and to be a bit selfish, I'm now sharing you with a whole lot of other people, and I hope they take the advantage to get to know you as well. This has been very good. Thank you.
Thanks again. It's been my joy and my privilege. Thank you all. We're on the journey together, Tim and Sarah. I always tell people I'm glad to be journeying with people. And my parting word would just be, none of us should try and go alone in this journey. And all of us are enriched when we get some people that are different than who we are to journey along with us. If more people would do that, I think life would be, I can look back now and see an invitation. I just say that, I know, again, an invitation from a dear friend, Reverend Merlin Levering, is gone to heaven now, from East Ohio. But a couple of lunch dates and breakfast dates, and then travels to clergy conferences and others. Time spent with him and others, but time spent with really getting to know somebody, being able to be open and honest, share those hard questions. Nothing was off the table. That has enriched my life and always put me in that place. So Tim, when you showed up in Cincinnati and there was an opportunity to spend time with you, it was a natural, and it's blessed me. And so I wish others would take advantage of not the superficial stuff,
right,
but to be genuine enough to know how being with others who come from a different perspective can enrich our lives. And so I thank God for that.
Amen.
Bless you all.
Thanks, Curnell.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Amen is right. I could leave you with so many questions based on what I've written down as I was editing this episode, but I'm going to give you just 3 questions. The first question is this: how has your family of origin influenced your self-awareness? Second question: who are the people who speak truth into your life? And finally, the third question: what circumstances in your life right now, and I'm going to say perhaps focus on your role as a leader, what circumstances in your life are inviting you to make an intentional choice to love? Once again, as a reminder, you can find show notes, including the questions that I just offered you, at transformingmission.org/podcast. You're looking for episode 168. And remember, who you are is how you lead. Bye for now.